How's it going, everybody? We're back, continuing our quest of the Hulai daily competition, challenge, inspiration type stuff. Let me just update my icon. So we're another day. We're gonna try fire today. The fourth of Hulai, the Independence Day of this country. So just get started. Houdini, crack that thing open. I was playing around with some stuff earlier today. I'm just gonna try something. I have a new idea. I'm gonna try it and see what happens. Let me get this so I can see my chat. All right, we should be good. Let's get started. Just going yo, Steve GH. Happy 4th. Happy another day of Hulai. So I did do a little bit of tweaks. It's going down, Long Walk the Fan. Good to see you too. So I did do some tweaks yesterday just to get my thing a bit looking a bit better with the time warp, like time stretch, time shift, time blend, all that stuff. The caustics turned out pretty well. When I slowed it down, it did become a bit weird in some places. Stasha, how's it going? Like you can, because it's, I retimed the base particles and then I'm still meshing it every frame. So when you do that with flips, it can get a little bit jittery. Like there isn't a great way to fix it perfectly. Ideally, you just want a lot more particles. But yeah, or you could do like time blend, re-advect the meshed or the SDF with your velocity field from flips to interpolate it between frames. But sometimes then you'll see like popping every 4th frame once it goes to a new mesh. So it's like, it's always kind of a bit of a weird thing doing really slow things with flip. I'm just gonna do a torus, and maybe I'll do a circle, or maybe just start with a circle. Same thing, the same shape. One is thick, one will be a curve. Well, not that one. 50, and we do have our curve orientational on curve. This one's a new node in Houdini 18 that's pretty nice. That if I just control click on it, gives you a nice up vector and normals that go along the curve. So I think this is a little bit better. Before, sometimes we were using the polyframe node. But I think this orientational on curve is a newer method that's a bit more stable or reliable. You have a little bit more features and stuff like that as well. So I usually use it instead of this older one. We'll just make a volume. And this one I want it to be a vector. And I'm gonna call it vel. If you just put 1 in for one of the values, then you can just start to see something. It makes it a little bit easier just to see the size of it. You could just go up here to wireframe. I think. I don't know why it's not showing me. Usually it shows you like the bounds as a wireframe. Maybe you have to be in the selection mode like this. Maybe that's it. I'll usually just fill it in. So I just want this to roughly encapsulate my torus or my circle. So just make it a bit bigger. Could do this by size. Hey, Mistaken Tuna, how's it going? So this, we just go a bit higher resolution, smaller division size. Not super crazy, but just something a bit more higher detailed. So what I want to do with this is build a pretty interesting or more interesting velocity field. So if I just do a volume slice, this is just going to put a grid down the middle of everything. And then I can use the volume trail node to sample or to trail each of these points through the velocity field, just to further like inspect or see what's going on inside of my volume. So you do the points that you want to trail into the first input, and then the velocity volume into the second input. And I usually switch it to advect by time, and then this is just like if the points were to travel through the velocity field for this time period, what path would they leave behind them? So I just did it with this visualization of 1, 0, 0, so they're just going over in the x direction right now. But we can do some more interesting stuff with this volume and how it relates spatially to the curve. So if I do int pn and vector pu, these are just variables you need to initialize when you're using the xyz distance function. So basically this will query the nearest, or it will find you the nearest surface position or on the whatever input you pass it. So I'm saying in this auxiliary input from my current voxel position, find me the nearest primitive number and the nearest primitive the UV coordinates of that primitive number. So if I just say maybe vector curve pose equals prim UV 1 for that auxiliary. Brando, how's it going? Getting some flames going today. So I'm getting the prim UV. I want just the surface position, and then from those coordinates that I found. So if I do vel, like I'm setting the value of this velocity volume now, and I could set it based off of the direction from the current voxel position to the nearest position on that curve. So something changed, but we can't see it that well. Luckily we have our way to inspect it here. So it looks like I messed up my order of operations or just subtraction stuff here. We want to go the other way. I think so. And it's getting bigger and smaller in size because this is according to how far I am from the curve. If we don't want that to happen, you can normalize it. So now all of these lengths are the same. So I believe that this is happening correctly. It's just pushing everything towards that curve. You can also do other... Actually, you missed something nice. Yeah, it's not super complicated, but basically I'm just starting in the process of setting up a velocity volume, making my own vector field, essentially. So we have the current value is the direction from each voxel to this curve that I'm creating. And then I use this orient along curve to give me the up axis, and then the tangent, which is getting stored in the normal attribute. Getting Lord of the Rings Sauron vibes. That was the guy in the tower, right? Sauron, the wizard. The other tower, the bad wizard. So we can also do vel and set it to prim UV, but instead of getting the surface position, we can get the surface or the normal attribute. Pn and pu using the same coordinates. So now this is getting that tangent or directional vector. So basically, if I control middle mouse on this, look at the, maybe I don't want it to be that direction. Okay, no, it's the N. I visualized the wrong one. So the normals is just flowing or pointing along the direction of the curve. So when we put that into the volume, each voxel gets that attribute, the nearest curve direction attribute, just copied over or transferred to it. So we have that. That's pretty cool. We might also want to make a float attribute that's distance from curve, and then this is going to just be the length of curve position minus the current voxel position. So just how far am I from the curve. And then maybe this one, it's a bit lazy to like keep overwriting or keep reassigning stuff to the output. I'm just doing it to visualize it, but to keep track of things, it's better to name them a bit more clearly in your code. So I have curve direction, and that's going to be the N attribute from the curve. And then maybe distance from curve. We'll just make another attribute, or I'm sorry, another variable. So variables are only used internally when this code is run, and attributes are actually assigned to the geometry. So vector direction to curve. So this is just pointing to our curve, and just normalize it. So then we have that. Do I have a background in coding? Not doing a ton of, like, I've never been a C++ person or anything like that. I've done a lot of creative coding with like Java and the action scripts, like back when they had that kind of stuff, but more of like an artist's expression grasps of coding. I've never been a big fan of like huge programs with, I don't know, I prefer visually to see the results as quick as possible, but I do enjoy like making stuff with code or just making stuff with computers. So it's getting easier to do it with nodes and stuff like that now, but I still find it faster and just more readable to set things up this way. When I was starting Houdini, I would, like, they didn't really have wrangles. So you would have to kind of make this stuff in VOPs, but it would just always be like a big chunk of wires, like things crisscrossing. So if you were copying and pasting it from one scene to another, or just diving in to see exactly what was going on, I find this to be a bit more clear, just where you have these things that are named exactly what they are, instead of like having to look at the wires and see what they're connected to and all that stuff. So now, like just taking my velocity, I could set that to the curve direction, and then that's a little bit more clear. If I want to change it to the direction to the curve, that one as as well is a bit more clear. I might have. So it looks like I did mess this one up. So I just need to, direction to curve should be, I forgot to add in the subtraction. So now it's pointing, before it was just pointing, it wasn't taking the current voxel position into account. So we have direction to the curve, direction along the curve, Curve position, I'm not really going to use that. We can also do a cross product. Do you think what you're doing now is beginner or intermediate? It's definitely more intermediate or advanced, I would say. I don't know, like it's just also more like mathematical. I don't know, more advanced in that terms. Like some people, I don't know, if you're doing level building or a lot of game design, you're probably using a lot more math and stuff like this. But if you're focusing more on like character grooming or effects, like effects, you generally use more math, but just depending on the area of computer graphics you're in, you have different skill sets or different stuff like that. So like if you're doing game development, you usually have a lot more of this math kind of stuff because you use this to like lay out levels and make terrains and make like propagate trees, and you always need to know like which way the trees you're scattering are pointing if you want to manipulate them with math or whatever. But if you're just doing more traditional effects, you can kind of just use the solvers and you don't need to know about all this stuff. So I'm trying to set up a custom velocity field that I'm going to put fire through. So that's why I'm going to all this trouble. So we have the curve direction, and we could use a cross product with the direction to the curve. I'm just going to go back here. Maybe we want to look down another direction. So this one's something special as well now. So this is like orbiting the curve. So we might even just want to name this like around, or maybe just like spin around. So everything just went black for a second, or back to normal, because I'm not changing the velocity at all. So we'll just set that back. Now we have everything. Right here, how's it going? So we have our velocity field and our torus. I might just try to make this a bit thinner, and if we want to, we could just like scatter points as well on this and then use those with the trail. So this way you can kind of predict if you were to move stuff along that velocity field, like where it would move to, or its predicted kind of trajectory. If you start combining some of this stuff, like day 4 Hulai Fire, yeah, so I'm studying up some velocity fields to move my fire, move my simulation and stuff around. So we have our curve direction. If I just start to add those two together, now you can see we have this twist stuff are going both along the curve and trying to spin around it. So just using these different directions, we can do a lot of nice kind of looking stuff. If we started to mix in like the direction to the curve, then we have stuff getting pulled in to the middle of it, and that's pretty cool. We could subtract it instead to have stuff getting blown outwards or blown away by it. Jeff, how's it going? Coming in late. Just finished my day 3 water and posted to side effects. Better late than never. Now let's do fire. Yeah, so I think it's better if you're just for learning, and you've already started it. You might as well finish your effect and post it there. I don't. Their like submission guidelines and rules and stuff like that are a bit of a mess, anyways. So it's like nobody even knows what exactly they're trying to win or anything like that. I think it's more fun just to keep up and see what other people are making, and just to keep yourself like in a rhythm, or I don't know, keep yourself motivated, figuring out new stuff, all that. And then we could scale all of these by just like multiplying or dividing it by different numbers. So just compositing these together and then scaling how much you want each of these different forces to be added. You can also like spatially with ramps and stuff like that have it so things, the further they get, they'll try to move back to the curve. But for right now, this is good. So this is going to be our direction. And we can do a DOP network. I don't really know. This is going to be my smoke simulation or fire simulation. So this, I think if I just do volume bound, this is going to be appropriate enough. Ooh, I don't know if I want to do that. Maybe just the traditional bound. So this will be our domain. We could go in and just gonna end up doing this every day. Have a smoke solver, smoke object. Magicians. People are getting in. We're just getting started. Just setting up my simulation now. The first part of this, I was just making a velocity field, like directional velocity volume to drive things with. You submitted it. I'll go through those once we start getting some stuff simulating in the background. So I'll just get rid of that stuff for right now. Sons of Houdini. Do OpenCL, it should be good. Day 12 fur. You're already starting to work on that one? You were the one asking about grooming and stuff yesterday, right? We'll do VBox, op input path, parent node, and last input, and d_x size. Didn't get it, so I think we just don't need these. We got it. Characters, creatures, yeah. So the fur, that whole animal section is pretty character based, right? And then just change this one to Centroid. These should all be 0 anyways, but just out of habit, I'll end up setting them. And then with this volume, you're starting with this resolution. It was like 100 by 50, 100 or something. We'll just copy it over. And I'm going to be using particles again, I think. So we'll do SOP solver, multi-solver, and this one, I'm just going to grab one of those expressions, but it's going to be the first input, the primary 0. Very cool fire sim. Yeah, well, we'll go through the submissions in a little bit. So I think with this torus, I'm just going to scatter a lot more points. 100,000 should be good to start with. And then just maybe with an attribute VOP. Gonna set up some noises that's going to be like a temperature source. So this absolute value can be good to kind of reflect values that are below 0. They just become positive numbers. And this vector to vector 4 is nice. This will convert your noise to 4D input. So the fourth dimension is time, or you can put other stuff into it as well, but it's just an extra offset that you can modulate the noise with without, like these ones spatially, you'll see it moving in a direction, but with the fourth dimensional input, it's just like an evolution. Yeah, this is nice to get veins. So I'm actually going to do the fit function, and then this way can flip it around. What? I don't know if I want to do it. Yeah, I think that's what I want. So I'm just getting the kind of the lines from it. You do like roughness or stuff, you could get more lines. You can also just multiply the input point position and get more of them that way. So maybe we'll start with something like this. And then I'm just going to use a wrangle below it to set the P scale. So this is going to be used for the size of my emission particles. So if I just set this to disks, then you can see roughly the scale of each particle and how big it will be treated once it gets copied over into voxels. Then I'm just going to make a temperature from the color. Just because temperature, I'm making it a float. Color is a vector. I'm just saying to use the X, where it's like the red channel of the color, the first component. And then I can get rid of these unnecessary points. The black ones are the ones that won't be contributing to anything. If I just do temperature is less than a threshold, change it to points. Now I'm sourcing less points, so it should be a bit quicker on that side of things. And then this one, I'll set it to get my temperature field. And now we can just take our particles and put them into the field. We want to use the same attribute. We don't want extrapolated, just a low threshold. And add them to that. And then I'll just convert from the dense Houdini volume to a sparse VDB volume. So I play it, we're getting stuff, nothing's moving around, nothing else is happening. That's expected. I just pin the view up there and usually turn off my cache. That will make the playback a bit quicker when you're doing OpenCL simulations. Yeah, I'll look at them in a minute. Once we get a cache or like a flipbook running, I'll probably go through all of the submissions. So we have a, like if I do want forces, you could do buoyancy and then our temperature will rise. But that's a bit boring, and we made like our pretty interesting directional or velocity field. So we can bring that into our pyro simulation with this apply data. And then just this SOP vector field. So that my name, this is just what the field will be called in DOPS, or in the volume, in the fields category. So if I go in now, I should see here, there it is. That's getting created, and then all of these settings are just these parameters right here. So I could just use SOP dimensions that will grab it that way. Use SOP path. We'll just keep going with our inputs. So it's just going to be the next input. You can see it updated some things there. This one I usually set it to faces, or just whatever I'm setting. This one here, like you can link these parameters up if you want. I usually just have them the same. Like the same idea with border type and all that stuff. It would be nice if they just had an option that you could like inherit these or whatever, but you just link them up this way. So I think we're good with everything else. Don't have to worry about it. And should be good. So we can just test it. If I do a linear combination and put it into velocity update, and our destination will be the velocity field. We want to add this direction field to the velocity field. And then I usually link up just to make sure OpenCL is on with all my stuff. It looks like nothing is happening right now. I think I have everything good right there. You can visualize this as well if you just do vector field visualization. That's what this green input is for. And then just use streamers. So I'm not inside the simulation, but that's what this visualization is doing. So I think if I maybe just multiply this by a bigger number, we don't get anything. But it should be working. Let me just add in this. We have buoyancy happening. So I don't know, I'm gonna have to examine this a bit. To source your fields this way instead of using the shelf tool way. I don't think any of the Houdini tools set up things with particles like that. You can, I think, use the volume source this way to bring in I don't know what the best way for this would be to bring in like a directional field. You might be able to do a pump. But I'm trying to do something specific here. This, I know it will only happen initial, like on the first frame. It won't keep updating every frame, so I don't need to, I don't know. It's just a bit more technical, but you might be able to set things up this way, I guess, with this vector stuff. But I'm just not, I don't know. I don't like to use this node too often. I don't know. You could use the shelves and use them that way to get started, but I've kind of dug pretty deep, and that's how I've ended up working like this. Mel Mass, how's it going? So I think Destination Bell, yeah, I don't know, it's just a bit from like knowing how DOPS works. I know that this is the most like efficient or direct way to modify this data. If I didn't know it, I'd probably be starting and using these things, but this is the reason that I'm doing it that way, I guess. So I'm just gonna try, we can go back up here to where I'm importing stuff. So like if I'm multiplying the velocities and stuff, it's working that way. So I know that works. This deer, it's a vector field. I've visualized it. We could go back in here for a second. I'm just gonna set the temperature visualization. So this, I should be able to just add these values to everything to have it move around, but I'm not sure why I'm not seeing it right now. Save before crash. I guess I don't. It might be getting ready to crash. We have this. Let me try something else here. So if I just do this, it should be manually kind of putting this field, just copying it, overwriting velocity with it. Let me maybe this guy here, I want it like solve on creation frame. I might just try a different method. I'm gonna go a different way. So we'll do this gas match field. This one, we'll use it to make our direction field. Can just set it like that. And with this one, grab this input, but the data name we want to put this into should just be direction, I think. Now it's working. I don't know why this should work. It's a bit weird. So you keep going. So just do this with vel, this one with deer, and add them. And now we have it moving things around. It's pretty cool. So it can get kind of slow to keep doing. Basically, this is happening every frame. It keeps pulling these in. You do gas intermittent solve, then you can just have this as like saying only do this at the start of the simulation, and don't update it again or whatever. So that's pretty nice, but with this direction I just want to make it a little bit more interesting. So I'm just going to take maybe I won't do this right now. So what we can do with this direction before we add it to velocity, we take our direction and multiply it by the temperature. Then we're kind of masking it or only modifying the velocity with the direction, like pre-multiplying it by the temperature. So now it's a bit more interesting because we have these like pressure fronts. The directional field isn't being applied everywhere. It's only happening where there is temperature. This is kind of like the same idea as a buoyancy force. But instead of having a specific direction that we're moving temperature, we're moving it in our arbitrary vector field that's like wrapping it around this torus or cylinder, string or curve or whatever. So I might switch this back to pulling things back into the curve. So anytime you are just moving stuff like along a curve, it will naturally want to fly off. And I might also just multiply this direction by distance from curve. So as it gets further away, it should, like the force to pull it back on should get stronger. Let's see if that works. This way things are just a bit more contained kind of along the curve. And maybe my direction, we want less. So it's just more spinning. Maybe something like this. It's a real gem. Yeah, so it's kind of just making your own custom buoyancy field or buoyancy direction. So instead of only being able to choose like up, down, left, or right, or diagonal, you can move stuff more naturally, like according to where it is in the volume. The buoyancy can be different in different places, essentially. So we're spinning, we're moving it, pushing it along the curve, and also like pulling it back towards the curve if it gets too far away. I might... all the cool stuff. Yeah, it's hard to convince someone to pay attention to a bunch of technical stuff unless you show them something that's really cool, I've found. So just keep the p scale the same. What I meant to do is multiply the temperature. So we're just doing 5 times as much because we're driving everything with the temperature field. This will also have the effect of like making the force stronger. And then if we're saying that this smoke stuff is like more of a fire, we might want some cooling rate so that over time it basically cools down or fades out. And sometimes with really fast moving stuff you need more substeps. Woo! It's moving pretty fast. I might switch to these different advection methods that I prefer. You can always additionally just multiply this. For me, the technical stuff is cool stuff. It opens up new ways of doing things. I don't have any commands, Melmass. I'm sorry. My Nightbot isn't fully set up right now. So I don't know why it's shooting in some of these directions so quickly. We have stuff and we've verified that it's working. So I'm just gonna go a bit lower with the resolution. So we're doing, everything should be like 200 by 100 by 200 now. Yeah, some people use these commands. Like that should just give you a list of options that you can ask a bot. Like I could add it with like exclamation point specs, and then if someone did exclamation point specs, it would print out my computer specs, or you could get links from it. You could set it up and someone could do like exclamation point Hulai or something that would give them the link to the competition. But I'm also new to the whole Twitch thing and I haven't set all that stuff up as well. So now this kind of is a bit closer to Fire. If we actually want it to look more like Fire, usually I start with this volume visualize. So this way, did I lose the cache? We might need, sometimes it wants something to be in that density field, but like even right now I just have no smoke. I just have a emission, but for whatever reason like if you take that out, I don't know, it's just a weird thing that it does. So now we're able to apply like an emissive ramp to this temperature field and visualize it in a way that's closer to Fire. I'm just going to go in here and turn off that limit. Like that should show us a little bit better quality. And then with these ranges, if we're going like, so here I'd multiplied my temperature by 5, so some values might be closer to that range. Basically, you just don't want too much of your stuff clipping out to white. And then this ramp, the way that it starts off, I usually find is a bit too contrasty. Like I prefer to have a just broader range of orange or whatever. So I usually spread it out a bit like that. This is pretty cool. Maybe with our source like area that we're creating stuff, it might be a bit too big right now. Maybe our source particles are a bit big, but all this stuff is already, like our voxels are still pretty big as well. Let's try going down a bit more. So this is starting to be a pretty high resolution simulation. We'll see how long we'll kind of benchmark it. We'll just do a flipbook default view. We'll dig into some of these things people were passing around. Oh, Rakesh, I saw this on their forum. It looked pretty good. I really like how you like all these objects are just holdouts or black or whatever. So like, I don't know, it's very interesting just to see like the depth and like, it took me a few seconds to figure it out. I realize this is like a house or something that's on fire. But this, just the detail overall looks amazing. You did this with the sparse pyro, or it was just with clusters? Missing the primitive nodes here. Yeah, I didn't use it this time. This volume visualization is kind of like an upgrade to the primitive node. Primitive node, you can just change color and thickness, but with this one, you can do the emissive ramps and as well change like the thickness of the smoke and stuff. So if I am doing fire or like energy or something where I need emissive color ramps, I'll use this. The primitive is just quicker because it's like less knobs to turn or whatever. Sparse pyro. Yeah, I think before the sparse pyro came out, doing these types of scenes was a lot more difficult because like your domain would be encapsulating the entire scene. And then for a while people were doing clustering, so like each of these like you would have a bunch of little domains that were like stacked around and stuff like that. But it's nice with the sparse things, like a forest fire or this type of burning scene is ideal for those types of solvers. Yeah, it always looks better on black, maybe. I mean, black, and if you had some indirect illumination, like that's the supreme chef's kiss kind of look. But yeah, and then once you start like rendering everything else, you're like, the fire doesn't look as good anymore. Oh no. Yeah, that's really cool. You made this, Umir? This is really cool. Whoa. This is amazing. This is like all the detail. So you were doing these folds and stuff with the noise from the UV attribute? Go back. Like this little crackly, the crackly guys? Yeah, this is amazing. I think the shot right here, this one's probably my favorite. I love seeing lava when it's rippling and folding and stuff like that. This one's pretty cool as well. But I like the tight, like concentric kind of rings or whatever in the earlier shot. Yeah, this is amazing. This is really good, like kind of the shot design, cinematography, and all that stuff. And then it's amazing. Yeah. You submitted this for the Hulai? So I don't know here. I think my I wish was on my Instagram. So what I'm gonna do here is go down a bit with my resolution, and I think my cooling rate is just a bit too high for right now. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. It's really really helpful to see like detailed breakdowns like that kind of stuff. I still love looking at those types of things just to see like all the steps that it's interesting, like just seeing some of those wipes of the different stages of everything. You can start to construct like the SOP network or all that stuff kind of in your head a little bit. So I think one issue as well is when I shrunk down my sources like this temperature just got a little less strong. And then also that maybe my P scale being so small, it just isn't all sourcing. There it comes, a lot stronger. So I think my directional field is a bit too strong overall. I might... One thing I'll do sometimes with this is you just set it scale by time step. That will make sure to compensate like how much you're adding each frame. Like when you're doing sub steps and stuff like that. And then it will also make it smaller. If you're working at 24 frames per second, it's the same thing as like multiplying it by 1 divided by 24. Would be nice if you break down that in a future stream or something like that. Like show how to make that kind of breakdown. Or do a breakdown of I think it'd be cool to yeah, I don't know, I've been thinking about different ways of doing stuff like that. Like with underwater bubbles, you could do like a time lapse of all the streams and have that like interspersed throughout a breakdown, showing like the gas simulation meshing of the bubbles or the air or whatever, the extra bubbles, and doing that'd be a cool breakdown to do, I think. Mean lava stick UV of fluid. So that was just using the flip solver like UV advection tools, right? Or dual rest. I didn't see any fading between two rest fields, but maybe if you set the delay stuff long enough. So I think it's still a bit too fast. Yeah, so it might be dual rest, or it might be like if you just set the delay of dual rest long enough. But you can usually tell if people are using dual rest or not, because he might have just visualized one, but like if it was dual rest visualization, you would see like this grid fading out and then the reprojected like rest field 2 grid fading back in. With something like lava, I would think you don't need like dual rest fields, because you usually want like all of this stretching and distortion, just because it lends itself well to this kind of effect. He used 1 rest and it looked good, but it was not as... Yeah, sometimes it just, the texture will stretch way too far, and you need 2 rest fields, but I think it just depends. It depends a lot on the duration of the shot, like the distance, camera, and a lot of different factors and stuff like that, I think. All right, so I'm gonna go back here. I think that doing this multiplication of the distance, like when it gets further, then push it harder, I don't think that was a good idea. So I'm killing that part of it. I'm also just gonna like ease back a little bit with this stuff just to get, should be like a bit thicker with the pyro, the source temperature. Since owning your graphics card, have you noticed Sims go beyond 24 gigabytes in memory? Sometimes if I'm really pushing it, like I've still hit the limit, once you get up into like 40 gigabytes, you'll kind of just like it will be very slow to work with anyways, but there's sometimes I've gone beyond 24. I don't as much anymore, just because when I first got it I was like trying it out, but it definitely does happen. Then I think this still just do a smaller number for the directional velocity, and then I'm just going to do the performance monitor to record what's going on when I do this next flipbook. So I just want to see if something is taking too long, what it is. Looks like my settings are directional field is still a bit too high. I don't know why it's just like the first frame. Things are really out of control. And then it tends to settle down. Like this simulation, it's just doing maybe 4 gigabytes of like the GPU memory. So I have it set to use this one. I think it's just using something like that, but once you start pushing it pretty hard, it will definitely like you could get beyond 24, but it just becomes slow, even like reading and writing the data from it and stuff like that. Let's cancel the flipbook. Now if I go inside of here, we can see what is taking a really long time to cook. Like I was saying with these sources, when you import a vector field, it's a pretty high resolution every frame, it starts to get pretty slow. So instead of doing that, I'll just do this gas intermittent field, or intermittent solve. So this just pulls it in on the first frame of the simulation, or at the start, like when it's initializing the simulation. But then over here, because we're modifying it or multiplying it, we don't want to do it. We don't want to ever write back or modify this field. That's why I left it, to keep bringing it in. So if I just do another match field, I can actually just copy this one that I was using earlier. This one I'm just going to call it force, and then what I'm going to do is every frame copy this direction to the force field. So this way I'm not bringing in a vector field from SOPs every frame. I'm just making a copy of it within this DOP context using my GPU. So it should be less like input-output slowness. We can eliminate this from being the slowest part of our network. So then I just need to switch this one to be force. So every frame we're copying the direction into force and then modifying force. So that way we're able to work more efficiently. And then just for like memory management type stuff, it's usually a good idea once you're done with like these fields just to kind of empty them out. So this way it will be blank at the end of all these steps. So now if I do another record, another flipbook, I might have done something wrong here. I might have found a problem of why things were moving so fast. Maybe I was like adding to it every frame. But you could see each frame was taking a lot less time to cook, and then this is no longer turning red. So that's the reason behind doing that. Just clear out this profile. So this, just copy deer to force. This one we molt force by temperature, and this one add force to val. So we should be good. I don't know, let's try setting this a bit higher. Then I'm also going to go in here, reduce the area that this stuff is taking up. Just change around my emission pattern a little bit. Then I'm just going to try adding more direction around the curve. Now we made those optimizations, we should be able to work a little bit higher resolution. Sometimes what I do with these, if I really want stuff to look more like fire, like if you, instead of starting at 0 for the lowest value, if you start at 1, like above 0, you'll hide, like you'll start to see more licks of flame and stuff like that. My values here might be a bit too low, but you'll hide like the stuff that looks more like smoke, or the big blobby like pressure fronts, and you'll start to just see a little bit more of the detail, like you're kind of clipping out the coolest part of the temperature. That makes hopefully that makes sense. It's kind of like maybe a gamma or something like that. So I think I've maybe my emission is like moving around too quickly. It kind of looks cool. It's like starting to get the little licks of fire and stuff like that. So we'll let this simulate out a bit more. I'm gonna get some water. I'll be right back. So you take another look at this GPU usage. So it looks like I'm getting closer to like 8 gigabytes. Depending if you actually just had one 8 gigabyte card, like the GTX 1080, GTX 1070, those are 1070, yeah. Those all have 8 gigabytes. Like this sim might kind of be crapping out on me, because I would also have, like, I've split this up, so I'm using this one as my display card. Otherwise, all of this memory would be on, like, this memory here would be on this one. I would be above 8 gigabytes, if that makes sense. Once you, I don't know, with Pyro stuff on OpenCL, that's when it starts to become really problems with like running out of it and stuff. But all the other like grains and flip with Houdini, you tend not to run out of OpenCL that much for whatever reason. So I think the motion and stuff is pretty cool. I might have like notched out too much of it with that. We can also just go higher with the temperature values. Do you compress your smoke caches before cache? Sometimes sometimes I use this primitive with use write 16-bit floats. This doesn't change anything within Houdini. This is just changing when you generate or save the BGO file, like bgo.sc or whatever. It will save it as a half float. If you look at the tooltip that comes up, it kind of explains that. Like, it's only stored on disk as a file that way, but it's not doing any compression within Houdini. They have the compressed stuff. Like this one, I don't think works with VDBs. This is older node for Houdini volumes. Yeah, it might be like 50% less disk space, but so it's usually a good idea to use it. They have the other stuff. I think they also have this like fluid compress. So you look at it and they're using that same option on it. They're doing it just with the same node here with it turned on. This is like using a different compression idea where basically you're deleting any velocity that doesn't exist where the fluid exists. So you're able to clear things up that way. If I'm just saving a field to disk, I'll just kind of keep it this way, and it is usually okay. I'm just gonna go a bit higher with that force, back to the default of 1, but it's still getting compensated with the time step. Maybe my cooling rate, I don't know, it might have still been a bit too high. Yeah, so you have different compression options. Usually you just want to do them when you're saving to disk. Like this convert to VDB is a kind of memory compression. Like it seems quicker for the viewport to display things as VDB. That's why I convert it to VDB there. So I think I still want to change my color ramps the next chance I get to expand the high end of the color range so that I have more less whites, like more oranges and yellows and stuff like that. But it's starting to look closer to fire or something like a gas or something like that. I think I forgot to do it, but my emission, like the noise is evolving too quickly. So because it's like you can kind of see it just dancing around very quickly, so that's giving me just a very uniform shape or result, because it just ends up like all blurring or mushing together. If you update it more slowly, then you should see like larger features rip off, kind of like that. So I'll just kill this again. So I was updating it. This is the fourth component here, is time. So I've linked it right here to fourth. If I just go back to 1, then it will basically be 6 times slower. I forgot to update my temperature ramp settings, so I'll do that next iteration. So this is the main reason why I'm doing the GPU stuff. It's pretty much the only way I've found to be able to run this Pyro stuff with like this much detail, somewhat close to real time, like on a CPU without OpenCL turned on. This might be taking 4 times as long or 8 times as long. So if I just wouldn't be able to make that many changes to things, or it would just take me like 4 times as long to finish the same effect, essentially. We're starting to get those bigger things kind of ripping off. Let's go back into here. So I'm just going to expand this higher end of the temperature, maybe the lower end as well. And sometimes I bring up this orange just to get less of this yellow color. I think my update, I would change it up and it was just a bit slow then. Maybe doing some more roughness just to kind of try to break this pattern up a bit. And then for right now, it looks like our bound is a lot bigger than we need it to be. So this is why I like to work with it as an extra input. This way you can just scale stuff and turn it on or off or things like that. I didn't know they had a Pyro post process. This is a new node. I've never seen this. This actually seems pretty nice. Oh, okay, so they have like a script that they run to make the material. So I should probably start using this instead of my volume visualization. I'll need to examine this next time. Whoa, we got lots of new nodes and stuff happening inside of here. Yeah, so this way with my domain, I just have a thing I can bypass or go back to my original size or still work at this smaller one. But now I should be able to work even more quickly, and if I need to go back to having the bigger bounds, I can just disable that transform node. So we're kind of back in real time almost. So this is what I was talking about, wanting to make that change with the temperature upper bound of the ramp. Basically, instead of getting a bunch of white, now I'm getting more, it's all kind of just look dependent, or if you're matching like a camera, it has to do with the exposure and stuff like that. Because of all those like artistic factors of filming or photographing fire, like there isn't really a physically accurate method to represent it. There's like the black body ramp, or the Arvid, how's it going? Good to see you. So yeah, I'm doing my fire Hulai testing submission or whatever today. Cyber, your viewport fire looks better than rendered fire. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, even rendering fire, if you're just doing an emissive material like this without anything for it to react to, like, there isn't too much of a difference between rendering it or just doing the OpenGL like rasterization of it. Thank you, Arvid. Yeah, I'm still kind of tweaking stuff, but basically what I've done is I've made my own directional like velocity field. So usually with fire or pyro simulations, you have just like one direction, like up. It's like a vector 0, 1, 0 for up for the buoyancy direction. But I've made like a special force field. I spent like the first hour of this stream doing a bunch of technical nonsense. But I was spending it so that I have this force that's like wrapping the fire and rolling it along this torus, kind of. Someone was saying it's going to be the Sauron, Lord of the Rings kind of vibe. So yeah, I might want more of that like rotational kind of wrapping force. So I have 3 different factors that I'm balancing. I have a force that's pushing things along the direction of this circle. I have another force that's rotating or spinning things around it. And then I have one that's pushing stuff from outside of it to inside of it. You might also just want one that's like pulling everything to the center of the world, because you can see just things on the, it's kind of like a tangent, like anytime you push stuff along a curve, things are going to fly off the edge of it. Based off particles with custom velocities, could you show that? Yeah, after this flipbook, I can go and do a quick walkthrough of the network. So it's, my source for this is particles, and then the way that I'm driving things is just using another volume grid. So this stuff, it's kind of nice, I think, how it rips off like that. We might want to add another turbulence, like just the turbulence shaping node to just have some more ambient kind of force pulling things apart. I don't know, I'm trying to think what else might be at play here. Yeah, so I could do that. So this is just too much kind of custom stuff that I was doing, but basically this is my custom force here that I'm creating, and just visualizing it with these different streamers. Like volume trail, we'll just do a streak through it. You can resample this volume resize, volume resample to get less of those. So my resolution scale, like 0.1. Now I just have less of them. So I've gone in and typed out, this is that force field that I was talking about that's giving me this kind of motion. So the temperature, depending on the temperature values of my temperature field or the fire, it will get pushed along these directions by the heat, or how strong the values are inside of it. So I just made a volume and called it vel. You would call it whatever you want, but this one's just the common lingo in Houdini world for like a directional vector. And then I was doing a bunch of like math stuff in here using this prim UV is basically the current position of the volume, like the voxel, and then this curve. You can just find, like, I created this tangent attribute. It's like just the direction along the curve. So the twist is just this cross product. So I do spin around curve, and it's the cross product of the curve direction, and then basically the position of the current voxel, the direction of that to the curve. So this is kind of effects artist math, is always just using cross products to make things spin. I had a supervisor one time that said, like, anytime you showed him an effect, one of his comments would be, and make it spin. Because like he always thought that would be it does make things just more interesting, and like even the silhouettes, like everything gets a bit looks a bit more fun. Yeah, so I could post maybe like some of this setup or whatever. But yeah, it should work pretty quickly with low resolutions to play around with and stuff. And then these are the particles that I'm sourcing in. I think they're just still updating a bit too fast. So like Its roughness here kind of makes it a bit blurry, and I'm using the fourth component there to change the evolution, like speed of things. Thank you. Yeah, it's starting to come along. I've been on these different challenges. I've gone like too far into the weeds some days, like into doing technical stuff that I didn't need to. I think I'm doing a good job. I don't know, it was pretty technical today, but I'm getting good results from it. Like I did my wind submission guy, and I made a like pyro simulation, so I had a velocity field to move him around with and a bunch of stuff, and then like the end result just didn't work that good, and it was like spent all this time to do something that I don't know, it didn't pay off, but this one seems to be paying off a little bit more. So I think the only big change that I did right here was just change the speed that this noise pattern was updating. So this way I should get like a more interesting motion or silhouette with like less uniform areas where things rip off. So instead of this just looking, I don't know, a bit like robotic, or it could be like a looping sprite or texture or something, this should just look maybe a little bit more, I don't know, I might have broken it up too much. It's hard for me to tell if I also want to change my like curve force. I think I might want to add some more spin and stuff, pulling things back. I'm gonna go in here and just update my noise. It's gonna move a bit faster. My spin, I'm going to multiply that by 2, and then the direction stuff that's pulling things back to the curve. I went from 0.4 to 0.9, so just roughly kind of doubling that as well. But it's still looking pretty similar to the last iteration, but I have a feeling once this stuff evolves a bit more, like this stuff isn't flinging off as much, it looks like. I don't know, it's hard to tell. It looks like too much twisting is making the motion harder to read. Seems to be kind of fizzling. Like it's hard to read the dimensionality of this form. I think I might want my yeah, I think I want to go back a little bit to where I was. So I think this offset speed, I'm gonna go a bit higher, close to 3 times as much. I'm gonna reduce that spin. And maybe my cooling rate, just so the temperature stays hot for longer periods of time. And then I might want to play around with my contrast kind of this ramp. Give this one more try. But it's not going to be one more. It'll probably be a few more after it. So I'm thinking Steve GH could add another noise to modulate temperature. Yeah, usually we'll end up doing that when I get closer to refining things. Like a high frequency noise to punch out or carve out kind of details. I'm thinking I'm also going to be adding a turbulence to a turbulence force to my simulation at some point to try to have some extra detail being added to some of these areas to get stuff a bit more like a flame lick or something like that. So I'm probably going to put this in the same light booth environment scene or whatever that I've been playing around with. But I'm not sure if Redshift, if you have an emissive volume, if it will how well it will light up the scene. It works. It's pretty fast, you think? It's a little bit noisy. Yeah, because I think the emissive lighting in Redshift isn't as good as using a mesh light or. So if I was looking around, I don't think you can use a volume as a mesh light. I might just have to play around with that. I don't know if I'll be able to do all that on stream. So I think this motion is starting to be a little bit better again. Yeah, it's staying a bit more readable as just overall what's happening. I think with my other ideas, this is kind of back to where I wanted to be. It was working better. My other ideas was just destroying the form and stuff like that a bit too much. This is 8 substeps. So I'm doing the substeps on the gas smoke solver or whatever, but yeah, this is I think with 8 of them. So with fire, I'll usually crank that stuff pretty high. I find that it helps, especially when I start adding the turbulence nodes inside, kind of trying to simulate or imagine that there's a lot of motion happening between each frame of the simulation, kind of like a multi-segment, instead of just one linear motion or movement or whatever. You can get some more curved turbulence, and I don't know, that's that's my thought process behind it. It's not grounded in a super technical realm. So we could add that turbulence now. So I find that you usually need this as a nice finishing touch or extra thing to sprinkle in with fire. So I'm just going to merge this into my velocity forces, my velocity modification chain here. Some of these nodes don't have the input on the top, so you just have to doing this is kind of the equivalent of wiring it together, one of those. You could just merge things, connect it, shove it in like that, and just keep chaining if you want. So this one I want OpenCL. For this density field, you just need to be careful. It should be temperature. I don't have a density field in my simulation right now, or it's not being assigned any values. And then when I'm setting up this scale of the turbulence, like the swirl size, I usually base it off of my simulation like resolution or division size. I'm doing 0.008. Maybe like starting off 10 times as high. This is the wrong one. So I want to be changing swirl scale. Or maybe I'll just do 0.1 to start. So basically like the size of a swirl should be like the size of 10 voxels, basically. Then the scale, you could start with like somewhere around the same number usually. For fire, the pulse length, I'll usually go a little higher just because it's like more turbulence. The turbulence should evolve more quickly. If it's like a smoke plume, like a slowly rising chimney or something, then you probably want your noise going, evolving like a lot slower. So we should be good. I'll just flip book it into the same session, and we could compare the two results. So it's a bit hard to tell right now. Things are definitely different, but you might still need to let things evolve, play out a little bit more. I'm gonna fill up my water again, so I'll be right back. It's looking a bit better. What do you think? So I think this turbulence just helps introduce like some more structures kind of in some of the stuff that's ripping off. It might just be too low as well. Like it's something you kind of want to add in until you really notice it, and then pull back on it. So I'm gonna go in and make that change. So scale, maybe like 0.45. Sometimes going with this turbulence from 2 to 3, you could get just some extra like detail in there as well. So put these in. Anyone else in here submitted their stuff already? This guy's been doing some cool stuff, doing like the alchemy symbols. It seems like they've both been triangles, like the water one. Maybe the water one was like an upside down triangle yesterday. You're gonna be in trouble. You're late. Your homework is late. Yeah, so I think this turbulence is more noticeable now. It might even be too much. But this is kind of what I was talking about, how it's like ripping these things into licks, like it's tearing them up a bit. So I'm just going back and forth between the old cache and this cache. So this is like a pretty big pressure front that's smooth and looks kind of like breaks the scale of things, or it just looks a bit too low resolution. And then with our extra turbulence, it looks like it's distorting it, breaking it up a little bit more. It might be a bit, my scale of it might be a bit too, might just be too much now. I'm just gonna go a little bit smaller with it, and then the swirl scale, the swirl size, I'm gonna go bigger. It seemed like it may be too high frequency. And then I'll add in, I'm gonna get out of this disks display mode. Just go to points. So I'm gonna add another noise to break this stuff up. So this is kind of what this one's doing if I play it. If I go into the real-time playback, it kind of looks the same. So usually I'll just multiply, like add an additional mask, kind of. And with this one, maybe I don't need to do the absolute value. Maybe something like that is okay. And then just make this one like a lot higher frequency. Okay, so I flipped this second one around. So this, it becomes a bit more noticeable. I'm kind of like windowing out or knocking back, using this as like another mask, kind of. So just pull back a bit on it, but you can see now it looks a bit more crackly, kind of like a log that might be on fire or something like that. Because this is just a bit smooth. So if you don't have detail in your source, you're already like behind the 8-ball or whatever. With your simulation, like it's very hard just to add that contrast and stuff in the simulation. Just go back to the first frame. We'll try another flipbook and see what happens. And again, because of my custom force is based off of the temperature, adding that extra detail into the temperature field is going to introduce just more detail in the motion overall. But I might have wanted to like compensate. So like if I was notching certain areas back using that noise, you might want to just multiply everything by 2 to kind of make up for it, or to keep the same kind of like overall value. But this could be okay. Yeah, I think we're gonna want to go a bit higher with that noise. So what I was trying to say is when you layer this on top, you're basically reducing everything by like half or something close to that. So if I just make this area a lot brighter, then I'm not like changing the overall amount of things. Sometimes it can be nice to leave this small value at still something just much lower. So you're just kind of like adding a lot of contrast or definition, kind of like going above 1 with this, you're kind of adding more range, like high dynamic range kind of to the attribute. Ooh. He's doing Vellum. This is pretty cool. This guy's been pretty solid each day. He did that, like for Earth Day, he did the thing that was pretty cool. That was like a floating planets that were like on a sushi, like fish plate or something like that. Do you guys see it? Let me see if it's in here. Maybe it wasn't him. I thought it might have just been a different, I think it was a different Japanese name or something. Someone did it for Earth Day. This thing's pretty cool. It's like a vellum wire. Everyone's using vellum here. His black body ramp seems to work pretty well. Like I'm having some problems with mine right now where it's just burning out a bit too much in certain areas. This is kind of what I was saying every time I was changing it, where you just want the majority of it to be like orangish yellowish. Even right now I have just too much saturation, kind of too many colors. Kind of makes it look CG. So I think I'm getting better now with that noise stuff that I was doing to change the detail of things. What is the deadline for Pacific time? I believe it's Eastern, like it's Toronto, because they're based in Toronto. So I think it's if you were on Pacific time, like I've been trying to do it by 9 p.m. But it's kind of a mess. Like I don't know if they're like I don't know. There's just so many flaws in their submission process. It seems like if you submit something, you can always go back and edit it. If you're like linking to the YouTube video, you can always like re-upload a different YouTube video. Or it's like there's so many holes in their submission process. It seems like to me it should have just been a like you actually send them the video file and then they would like curate the gallery of submissions or whatever. But yeah, I think it's just 9 p.m. Pacific time or midnight end of day Toronto Eastern time. Yeah, I don't know. Seems like they just don't have a lot of experience running these kinds of events or competitions or whatever. Hopefully they're getting into this is just to get people creating. Yeah, I don't know. It's even the even the first thing when they announced it, the name of it, Hulai. Like I couldn't figure that out at first. It was like, what? Huli? What? It didn't make sense to me, and then I figured it out. But I think the branding of everything that Side Effects does is always a bit like kind of in left field. So I wanted to reduce my turbulence amount and increase the pulse length so that it's updating a bit more slowly. Everything just seemed a bit too chaotic in that last run. And I might, like if everything's just moving too fast, I can do this. This is basically saying reduce the buoyancy or reduce the speed that temperature is driving the other, reduce the speed that the temperature is driving the motion. Yeah, and I don't know, I think it was better. It was a bit better when I didn't have this higher spin or directional force. I think I had this at 0.4 earlier. So like this earliest test I think is the cleanest, best looking thing so far. So I'm trying to get a little bit closer into that. Would be cool if the spin force was closer to the circle, so the licks that go outside can peel off more. Yeah, I might add some masks, like all of those things, you can change them by the region or the distance of the curve. We'll see. I'll do another flip book right now and see what it looks like. But yeah, it does seem a bit too I don't know, almost robotic or whatever as the. It's almost like that overall kind of control force maybe should just get tapered off as things get further from the curve. Seems possible. I'm not sure if like maybe even the tube. I guess the thickness of the tube is okay. Like with Pyro, you generally want your source to be like thinner or inside of your actual shape you want to make, just because everything's gonna stick out. Like as you move stuff around, it will just expand the form of everything. Might be my turbulence is still too much. Yeah, I think it's too high. I'll get this force, my directional force, to be higher. Then I'm gonna reduce this. Do you think fading out that directional force could work well? So I think this is already starting to appear better. Basically, I think whenever I lose too much like directional, like rotational force, things just become too chaotic because you don't have like a nice form or directionality to like read. I think this one's turning out a bit easier to like visually tell what's going on. So part of the reason why I'm not doing that spin force, I guess, as this stuff cools down, it should reduce the influence of things. They're already kind of peeling off or like slowing down a little bit because of that, but can accentuate it even more if we added that like modification in. We're getting a bit too too big now outside of our domain. We might need to expand that. Yeah, I think it should help. So we'll add that modification in. So we basically have this velocity that we're adding or putting into the volume, but I can just multiply it by another number So I have this distance from the curve. So if I just fit or remap that value, we can basically say when we're 0.25 units, or between 0.25 units and 1 unit from the curve, when we're 0.25, multiply by 1 or use the full strength of my force, and then go to 0 when I'm at 1 distance away. And then instead of taking the time to run a simulation, I can just visually look at things this way. Could do kind of a cross-section view as well. So if I comment this out, we can see the change. Basically, this force was at full strength everywhere. But this way I'm just masking it out like that. So it is possible to only apply this mask, or you can do different ranges to each of these forces or operations, like spin, direction along curve, and all that stuff, but I'll just try it like globally applied to all of them for right now. And our domain, this might help us like stay within the domain, because we're not gonna keep like shooting stuff off as far. I'm just gonna expand it from 0.7 to 0.8. I might change this range just so that we still have a pretty strong core. Something like that would be nice. We'll give this one a try. So the start should all look the same. We haven't really modified any of the motion or forces within this region, but basically as we get to this empty area, just the turbulence will kind of start to rip stuff apart a bit more. And then overall things will just kind of behave on their own, like they'll no longer be forced using the same values or the same directions we were using before. So even with this one at the start, you can see like these things are still saying push me like along the curve, even when they're out here. But this time they should just be rolling off a bit earlier. I should have made the change to my temperature ramp. I forgot. We were looking at this one before and I was saying this is generally just a much more pleasing thing to look at. Like having this very contrasty, saturated is kind of a bit of a mess. It just looks a bit CG. It helps you visually like debug things because you can tell what the hottest part and what the coldest part is pretty easily, but for rendering things it just doesn't look as real. Ooh. Does anyone know this this emoji's name? I always see it, but I don't know like what the appropriate context is to use it under. This is starting to be a bit better. So this is originally my intention with this. It was like too uniform, I think having this negative space around these things ripping off is a bit better. Do you guys know it? It's called like I don't know, it's like a Japanese theater mask or something like that. He's got like horns and stuff. This guy's is pretty cool. I think I saw it on Instagram or something. Some of it, I think his motion blur is a bit... one of the problems with motion blur with fire is that it all is like linear. Like it just becomes a bit spiky when your velocities are so strong. So you get... you like lose your flame licks or detail, and things just become a bit too spiky when they start moving really fast. This one was someone in the Pavel, you're in here? So I think you posted this in the Discord or somewhere, right? It's like Halloween turns into the pumpkin. Or it could be a ghost. It's kind of like the ghosts in Luigi's Mansion or something like that. This is a classic. The pig roast. This guy's was amazing. I think to loop them like he's just doing kind of the typical trick of time offsetting and then fading them together essentially. To like he's emitting and then turning off his emitter and letting it dissipate and then just stacking and replaying the same simulation again. I'm guessing he might work in games or something like that, because this is a pretty common, like if you're making sprites for games, you would do this technique. So you could have like a torchlight or something like that in your environment, or these things, like if something's on fire, you just stack a bunch of these up or something like that. But his detail, like he nailed it in terms of matching like slow motion reference photography or reference footage of fire. Yeah, so I think my motion's working better. I might even just want it ripping off sooner. Like it still seems maybe to be inheriting too much of that motion. Yeah, tighter fit. So with this one, if I just go back to originally what I thought I was going to use, and then even my maximum, kind of do that. So if we look here, this is our temperature sources, and then this is like our field fall off or effect. So maybe even I'm gonna tighten this up. Might be too much. Let's see what happens. Usually setting all this stuff up, it's better to make too big of a change and then like you find the middle, or you find the best result that way, instead of like incremental add 10%, add 10%, add 10%, then you wasted a bunch of time and you're still like, I need just a little bit more. So nothing different yet. It kind of seems like it just takes some time for stuff to get like outside of, but we basically didn't change the core of our forces. It just, we only changed things that are happening in that area. This person I think has been doing stuff with letters every day. they're gonna have, that's kind of my idea with my stuff, to keep doing like a similar environment so that I can put them all together as like one cohesive just experimentation or whatever. This one is nice. I think it would have been a lot better without a background though, right? Like if this is fire just looks good on black all the time. It's always a bit weird, like pre-multing it and stuff like that. You don't know how much to, how like opaque is, because I think like fire, it never really has an alpha value. It's just a purely like emissive medium or material or whatever. So you would expect like just different kind of way that it would be pre-multed with the background. But the detail in it and stuff like that in motion is, he kind of nailed it in terms of the reference. Like I've seen other, I've gotten reference pictures of this type of stuff before for effects, and it's a pretty, it's just very like suction kind of, lot of velocity at the bottom, and then the detail and stuff at the top. He nailed it. Yeah, so I think it's definitely helping stuff be a bit more contained. Looks like even still even might not be enough of a change. It's definitely helping. Like you can see if I go between the two frames here at the bottom, this stuff isn't crashing through as much. So overall things are more contained. So I'm gonna just do a few more changes. I'm gonna try some stuff with this ramp. I'm just gonna get rid of that yellow for right now. And then even this red, I'm just gonna drop it. Kind of something like that. You can also make it look a bit more contained, or kind of like fire if I just bring up my bottom range of those things. I'm just remapping the ranges of all that stuff a little bit. And yeah, I might just reduce that core strength, proximity region, or whatever you want to call it. Let's take a look at this. So we're already pretty far in. I'm getting close to like just getting ready to cache something, and then jumping in and doing some quick renders and seeing what it looks like. So I think this feels a bit more just like refined or realistic, kind of reducing the range of your color ramp overall. Sometimes this white, I might have just, I don't have that UI open anymore, but like the white range, the white point of that ramp I think should be higher as well. It's a bit odd whenever you like quickly transition from a fully saturated color to white like that. You can even not have white in your ramp at all, and then if you're just tone mapping it using like Redshift or ASUS or whatever, then you can, sometimes that's a better way to work. It's always weird assigning shading pyro, because there's like, it clashes with like color theory and like the way things should be photographed and exposure is treated and stuff, and the artist is just left to like artistically decide all those things, and you can get, compositors can get stuff that's like in really weird ranges a lot of times. So maybe it's nice to have a bit of that red, like super saturated stuff right before it burns out. The more that I bring up the bottom range of my ramps, the more that can like reduce these big mushroom type things. And the more kind of spiky, like lick elements or whatever, hopefully you start to see. Yeah, so I think this motion and stuff is starting to work. I'll probably just cache this. I might have to expand the domain a little bit. I'll just cache a few frames and start doing some render kind of settings and stuff like that. So just put in this VDB thing to save, just save them in half floats. And just do the cache. So this will be my ring of fire. I don't know if I need all 240 frames. Maybe just like 996, like 4 seconds of time. Make this domain a little bit bigger, and I think we should be good. Look like my sometimes that save to disk as background doesn't work for me. We got lucky today. So this should start caching in a little bit, and then we can start playing around with these ramps and stuff some more. It might take a little bit of time because like when you do save to disk in background, it has to open up the scene and like rerun even all of your input SOPs and stuff like that. So if you're doing like something that takes 2 minutes to cook, it basically is starting like from a cold session. It has to redo all the steps. It looks like we got some frames. Yeah, so we're already working pretty quickly. So we can just go in with this visualizer, and now it's a bit easier to dial this stuff in because you could do it like more interactively or whatever. So I might just go up to like 20 with the top end of that color ramp, just to get that white area to be like very hard for things to hit. Like it has to get super hot to start to like desaturate that much. And then this black one right here, I'm just gonna add a bit of color to it. So these two ramps get multiplied together, so this one doesn't actually have to ever be like black or 0, because it will get multiplied by the bottom of that ramp. So this way you could just add a bit of saturation to the cooling parts, or those parts of the fire. These ranges I have are a bit of a mess, so I might want to just match the two of those up. Sometimes people will do some funny things with these ramps, like they'll add a bunch of notches, like spikes and stuff to them. You just get this thing a bit easier to adjust. So what they're trying to do with this is like add extra detail, basically. So if I just do this kind of thing here, it kind of looks more like a gasoline explosion or something like that. But basically by like reducing all of this stuff, things just get a lot sharper and look kind of more, perhaps more detailed. But in motion, like as the temperature cools, it will run through this ramp, so you can get like a bit of flickeriness, or just it looks a bit unnatural. So I don't know, I tend not to try to do that. But it can be good to have like something going on with this ramp, so it's not just like a flat line or like a linear function. Sometimes doing this, you're kind of just baking in like a gamma curve. You're like doing that. If you go the other way, you're just kind of blurring stuff out. Everything's just a lot like smoother or flatter, kind of. I think let's just get rid of that one. I'm gonna move this one back lower. Whoop. So I think I wanted to adjust this position. So something like this I think is a bit more natural. Let's see where our frames are at. We did all 96 of them already. So it looks like I still crashed up against that domain a little bit. The best idea is to keep expanding it if you have like the RAM and the time to fit that stuff in. You can do some like feathering of these volumes after the simulation, and it will hide the artifact, like the flatness, but it's not the best idea. But yeah, I think this is pretty workable. So we'll keep this, just keep this scene the way that it is. This will just be our fire. And then I'm just gonna go in and grab the cyclorama, the set that I've been using from the previous submissions. So we just get yesterday's water. I think I started using the scenes directory. I don't need to cook that. It was like the meshing operation and stuff is a bit slow. I'll just grab all those nodes, shove them in here. If we go back to the object level, this background stuff, I don't need to do the cropping, or probably don't need to do this like scaling. I was just doing a bunch of stuff because with the water, I really wanted to control like the reflections and refractions of it. With this fire, it's not as big of a deal. And then with the fire, I'm just gonna do my transform of it down at the SOP level. So you can see with my actual field, like this is what it would look like if I just visualized the raw values, but because I'm moved up the floor of my ramps, I'm kind of hiding a lot of the fluffiness of it or whatever. So let's just see what this looks like through the camera. How that thought. Whoa. Just staring right into the thing. Is it behind? I guess it's just the redshift, like materials or whatever, are a bit out of whack. I might just go in here with the D button. If you turn on limit resolution, if I don't care too much about like the actual details and stuff in it anymore, you just move around stuff and like reposition it faster. With that, it will be downscaling the volume, basically, downsampling it to a lower resolution. So something like that could be pretty nice. We might want to crop in a bit on it, but I think we're okay for right now. So we could try doing a redshift material as a last ditch solution. I might just switch to Mantra and render my fire with it, but I'll try it with redshift. So we'll do volume, put it into volume, and we want to be using mainly this emission ramp. There's also the color channel that I was using in one of the older streams. We could like bake this stuff into a color channel, but I think it's going to be a bit better to just try it this way for right now. So emission should be temperature. I think we can just grab these values here. Like if I copy parameter, just start to keep track of these names. Then I can just do paste values. We get all of those settings. You could open up another pane tab if you want. Sometimes I do things this way to just grab parameters from other areas. So I'm just going to grab the min and max range. Under advanced, it looks like I can't. They're different types of parameters or whatever. So just go from old min and old max. I think we're ready to test. Just gonna turn off this caustics. So we'll do redshift render view. See what we get. Nothing. So I didn't assign the material yet. That's the first issue. Still have nothing. It's possible that this still needs a density volume to work with. I think I'm just gonna work rendering something down here. So I can just try merging the two volumes together. So we'll take our source temperature, we'll rename it to density, and merge it with the original one. So now we have a temperature and a density. So I think it might be the same kind of issue with this one, like I still needed the field over here. Now we have something showing up where it's a bit better, but not very much. It still looks a bit odd. So I might turn that all the way down. Maybe I want the same settings over here. Maybe this one I need it to be it's possible their ramps don't work the same way. You still need this stuff to clamp down at 0. Now if I scale it up a bit, we have something that kind of looks like fire. So now we just have, I eliminated the scatter component of the smoke. We just have something that's purely emissive. I think with this absorption, like if you want to, this is like you're treating it like there's a bit of soot or smoke or something like that within the stuff that's kind of catching the light a little bit. I might want to go a little bit lower with those ramps. Then I'm going to get rid of that absorption stuff for right now. So it looks like the redshift ramp isn't as flexible as the Houdini one. Like I had a scaler and this color ramp. Seems like here, turn off the lights. You think that they're changing the stuff? Turn the lights off. So yeah, so I can do I should be able to do emissive, right? My plan in the end is to have it on that background, but I don't know what kind of lighting I'll put on it. So let's see if I do this GI bounce. I don't know. It's hard to tell. It looks like I'm getting some like indirect illumination. We just go to photographic. Yeah, so it is lighting up my environment now. So I think like you need these GI engine. You could use the other ones. I usually just do brute force. It's like a bit easier to debug. There's like less things to worry about. Yeah, so it is lighting up the environment now. Let's try just like a bit of light. Something like this maybe could be nice. I was also using the texture, like this ramp. Kind of a ombre. So maybe doing something with that to get it, I don't know. But yeah, because this stuff is just a purely emissive material, you're just gonna lose. It's gonna be harder to see it on white. It also just starts to look a bit odd with like the exposure. Like if your camera's exposed for white like that, you would expect to see a lot more of it like clipping out or kind of blooming out or whatever. So maybe something like that is kind of nice. You can also start to add this reflective component. I'm starting to get the light reflecting in the background. I'm gonna change that. I might want to make these, add another light and make it symmetrical, but this should be okay for right now. So I just increased the IOR to make it more like a mirror, or just more reflective. And then with this roughness, you could have the blurriness of your reflection changed a bit. Let's go back into the fire. So I was saying that you just have the one color ramp. So you kind of want to start baking like the intensity into this ramp here. So as this stuff cools down or our temperature decreases, we need to bake in a bit of less intensity. Like the Houdini one, you could decouple them and just work purely with like color in one ramp and intensity with the scalar one, but this one over here is a bit different. Maybe we really want to boost the scale. And then this stuff. Starting to get into that weird territory of the white being too bright. Go a bit higher. So something like this could be pretty nice. Just working with these colors a little bit more. It's always hard to get this like yellow area of your color of your fire looking realistic. It gets in the banana territory all the time. You can do some stuff here, kind of like tone mapping with the desaturation and overexposure, but it looks like it is going to be better to have that kind of stuff just directly in the shader. So I don't know about this, like sometimes you can even just get rid of that white. And then sometimes desaturating the yellow tends to be a bit more pleasing. Something like that might be a bit better. So something like that I think is starting to at least look somewhat decent. Let's just try maybe a quick. I'll do the lighting thing I was talking about right now. I'm just gonna make a copy of this light, and then we go outside of it. I should just be able to flip this to have it on the other side, and then I think if you just add like 180 to that, maybe I should have subtracted to go the other way. I might need to do some other stuff. Is it this one as well? Too much stuff. So I don't know. I'm just trying to. Ooh, my gimbal is messed up. I'm just trying to get like a kind of duplication. Sometimes when you have these keyframes and stuff, it messes it up. So I'm just trying to replicate and get like a symmetrical kind of lighting or whatever. Something like that. And I'll save this again. Well, I might just do a frame range. We're doing 96. 4 seconds of animation. I don't know if I need that many GI bounces. This stuff might be a bit noisy, but we'll just let it go for right now. So yeah, I'll just do a render to mplay, and we'll take a look, see how quickly this can render with Redshift, and just see what it looks like. So we might be getting 10 seconds of frame. Might just go back in here and do half res. Oops, almost did the wrong, almost clicked the wrong button there. So it might look worse than the... I guess it doesn't look much worse than the flipbook. I think our color ramping is gonna be a bit better. Might want to do it again with some, like if I were to do another iteration on this simulation, I would probably start with more like source velocity to just make it more interesting, like add some hand animation when this stuff first opens up, kind of like a portal or something like that. Like just a ring kind of stuff is starting in one direction and then going to the end, like the carve stop, or a bunch of different ways you could set that up. It just seems a bit like a test right now, like seeing the emission. It's always a bit funky seeing that your emitters like turn on. This stuff here is starting to, I think that ramp is starting to look a little bit better. I don't know how this one got a lot darker. I might have hit something in the color space settings over there. That I might have like, there's a scroll bar and sometimes it gets set to linear or something. I feel like I'm getting closer to that setting, that gamma or whatever. sometimes if you want to, you can add some smoke, like even just using the same temperature field and just remap it. Just depends on the kind of fire you're trying to make, if you want it like purely emissive or to treat it like there is a bit of soot or something that can help it, especially if you're going over a white background, just to see something so it's not like it just kind of looks like slammed on top or whatever like that. But yeah, that's pretty close to where I'm gonna leave it today, I think. These Hulai submissions are starting to wear on me. This might be the last, I don't know. I guess this week is pretty difficult because it was all like elements you wanted to simulate. Some of the animation stuff, it could be more just like procedural shaping functions and stuff like that. The lower values are lingering too long. Looks like ink in water. Yeah, so I think the lower values like going into smoke or something like that. Yeah, because it's looking a bit more like smoke or like ink in water. The way that those things are rolling off, I guess, is too slow or whatever. Yeah, Hulai is fun. Takes a long time to start and finish in a day. Yeah, it's a lot of time you have to set aside to get something even just looking presentable with Houdini in one day. So I don't know how. I mean, there will be some Iron Men in there because there will be people have just been putting in like kind of shit posting or whatever. But yeah, it's going to be hard to get like nice looking things for all 30 of the days. But yeah, I think Steve's comment, like if you just see this ring structure burning a lot hotter, and then this stuff maybe is just a smoke or like a black soot, or just invisible, it's going to look a lot better. It's always difficult when you're setting up your shader because you're like, oh, I want to see that extra detail. It's going to look better, but then the motion gets ruined when you actually like play it. But yeah, I might still play around with this a little bit after the stream. It's not looking too good right now, but hope you guys enjoyed the session. We'll be doing. I'm not sure what's going to happen tomorrow, but I'll probably be back here again at 1 p.m. So hope you guys enjoy the rest of the day. If you guys are submitting fire submissions, I wish you luck with them. Feel free to go in the Discord with questions or anything like that, or work in progress feedback and stuff like that. So take it easy. Enjoy the rest of your 4th of July if you're celebrating. If not, have a good Saturday.